Target prioritization is the skill that I believe to most improve players who utilize it correctly. The entire concept of target prioritization is to confirm as many kills as possible in the most efficient manner possible. For example, if you're playing Hanzo and you decide to land just 2 shots, would you rather land them both into a full HP hog or both into an unsuspecting Ana? The answer should be pretty obvious, since landing them both into the Ana confirms the kill, and landing them both into the hog does almost nothing. There are a few general rules for how to prioritize targets to most efficiently confirm eliminations, and we'll go through those now. These rules aren't in any particular order, but the first rule we're going to discuss is to focus heroes by their role. Support and DPS heroes naturally have less health than tanks, and so punishing these is a lot easier. When you think about it, killing any hero on the enemy team takes out 20% of their total resources, so focusing the ones that inherently take less time to kill just makes sense. Supports are your main priority here, but they do generally have some survivability options to stop them from being constantly assassinated. You want to focus supports where possible, since when you have support heroes alive, your team's total health pool is technically infinite. Taking out the enemy supports will limit the enemy team's total health pool, making them easier to take down afterwards. Tanks generally come last in this pecking order as they're naturally the longest heroes to kill. Generally, you want to avoid wasting time shooting the tank and focus on other targets. There are certainly times to shoot tanks, as I'll discuss later in this video, but in general you should be focusing on other low health heroes first. Tanks also gained a passive ability in Overwatch 2, granting you 30% less ult charge for shooting them, so not only are you less likely to actually finish them off, you're also now charging less of your ultimate by spamming into them. The second rule we're going to discuss is to focus low health heroes. This one should be totally obvious, but I see a lot of people fail to capitalize on this, especially in lower ranks. If you've ever watched any high level Overwatch, you would have heard constant shouts of "he's won." This simple yet effective callout is a message for the player's team to switch their target prioritization onto the weak target. This tip obviously makes a lot of sense, as a low health target is a super efficient kill to confirm, but I wanted to emphasize how important this was to actually follow up on. Next, our third rule is to focus low cooldown heroes. In many ways, this tip goes hand in hand with the previous one, but is a higher level skill in my opinion. Most cooldowns within Overwatch do one of two things. They're either offensive cooldowns, used to quicker eliminate opponents, or they're defensive cooldowns, used to help a hero or their team to survive. If you're able to track a hero's defensive cooldowns and push them when they're unable to use them, you're going to have a much easier time in taking them out. In high ranks, the most common example of this would be Kiriko. Both her Suzu and Swift Step are defensive abilities, so pushing in on a Kiriko who can neither teleport nor bell is a much more efficient way to confirm the kill than focusing onto a Kiriko with both abilities available. Another good example of this is Orisa, whose Fortify and Javelin Spin are great survivability tools. Catching an Orisa without either of these available is more often than not a great opportunity to eliminate her. Rule number 4 is to focus out of position heroes. Positioning in Overwatch is a skill in itself, and finding a player who is constantly misplaying the skill will grant you some super good opportunities for easier eliminations. This rule is super situational, but I'll give a few examples to help it make sense. The easiest to understand would be a support player who strayed too far ahead of their team and are essentially frontlining. As support heroes aren't designed to be in these situations, it's important to focus and capitalize on when you do find a support hero out of position. Another example of this can be a flanking DPS hero. Whilst this isn't necessarily out of position, being isolated away from your team without any help on the flank is a dangerous place to be. If you and a teammate are able to focus this hero, it will more than likely end up with you taking them out, leaving the rest of the fight to be played as a 4v5. This tip can also combine with the cooldown tip as well. If there's a DPS Kiriko taking a flank position, she's usually quite safe if she has Swift Step available. However, if you've seen this Kiriko teleport into the flanking position, she's now a lot more vulnerable and easier to prioritize. Our fifth rule is to focus players by impact. This rule changes game by game, but in essence you generally want to be focusing heroes that are impacting the game the most. A typical example of this would be a Widowmaker tapping on heads, where you might even consider switching to a dive hero to make their lives a lot more difficult. If you're able to successfully focus and eliminate the carrying player, the chances are the rest of the team aren't as good as they were, leaving you with a completely winnable fight. Other examples of this could be a Pharah that's uncontested in the sky, or even a support player that's just keeping everyone alive. Making sure you focus any player who is standing out as a high performer is going to lessen their impact and make more games completely winnable. And our sixth and final rule is to focus heroes that are using an ultimate. Building from our last point again, heroes using an ultimate ability will currently be having a larger impact on the game than the rest of their team. Taking them out and stopping their ult will not only take away this large impact, it will also take away an entire ultimate from the enemy's pool. The best example of this is Ramatra, whose annihilation pretty much requires him to be eliminated before it stops. Focusing this target to end the ultimate will now allow your team to resume fighting normally and potentially win the fight with a player advantage. There are even some ultimates that make heroes weaker, such as D.Va's self-destruct. Whilst it only lasts a short period of time, and you want to make sure you can get to cover, if you have the opportunity to eliminate the D.Va while she's out of mech, it can be a super efficient kill to confirm. Echo can sometimes play into this as well. When she transforms into a tank, her health pool actually caps out at 300 HP. With her now larger hitbox, she becomes easier to burst down, so focusing her to bring her out of her ult is a huge play to make. Alongside those, there are a few heroes that remain stationary during their ult, making them easier to hit and more vulnerable in general. The best examples of this are Bastion, Junkrat, and Pharah, who gain powerful damaging abilities from their ults, but must stay still in order to use them. This sets them up to be prime focus targets, assuming you can find them of course. Those are the 6 rules of target prioritization within Overwatch. However, there's an important note to make about all of these rules. Whatever the status of the enemy that you're prioritizing, it's always more important to make sure that you're not overextending to confirm these kills. With the move to 5v5, staying alive in Overwatch has never been more important. Whilst you should always be thinking about the most efficient target to focus, you should always be wary of your current health pool, your current cooldowns, your team's position, your support's line of sight, and the status of who is and isn't alive on your team. You also want to be considering the target prioritization of the enemy team as well. When fighting in Overwatch, it's important to consider how much damage you expect to take in any given moment. Should you be low HP, low on cooldowns, out of position, carrying your team, using an ultimate, or literally just a support player, it's important to consider your aggression and positioning more carefully. I would say this especially applies to my tank players out there, as you're generally the player under fire the most. So should you be low health or low on cooldowns, it's important to play slower to restore some health or regenerate some cooldowns. If you found this guide useful in any way, please do drop a subscription to the channel, but apart from that, I'll see you in Circuit Royale.